Welcome to ConcordMonitor.com race day preview. I'm Dave D'Onofrio alongside Gavin Ferretra
How you doing?
and Michael Pizzone.
How's it going?
Good. Well, it's race day. Finally arrived here on Sunday. I just wanted to get your general thoughts on a weekend that we've seen 4 races already. The big one coming up today. Eddie McDonald a couple of wins. Kyle Busch a big one yesterday. What stood out to you guys so far?
Well, I think the ACT race was interesting last night. It's too bad that it only went 50 laps because I think the drivers are really just starting to get into it in lap 35, 40, getting used to the longer track. I would have liked to see that go maybe 75 laps just because I think the last 5 or 6 laps we saw some really good racing, and Eddie McDonald got his second win in 2 days, so that was, to me, that kind of stood out as far as what I've seen so far.
I, for one, was excited to see that Sprint Cup qualifying got in and wasn't rained out for once. So now you got cars that are ready to race up front rather than working their way up. So.
Yeah, and that stood out to me as well. I think Juan Pablo Montoya turning the fastest lap ever at the Speedway was very impressive, and then to back it up a day later with the fastest time in both practices, I think he's got the car to beat today. Who else do you guys think might do well here this afternoon?
You got your Hendricks guys. You can't forget them.
They were fast in practice as well.
Yeah, and Mark Martin, Jimmy Johnson, Jeff Gordon. They're always going to be factors just based solely on who their owner is. But you get Carl Edwards yet to have a win this year, but I think he could do some damage in the chase. But I don't really think there's one guy that really stands out. And when they were talking the other day, a couple guys said that Casey Kane, Brian Vickers, they both said that there's not that one guy that really just jumps out at you to win. Obviously, Jimmy Johnson being a 3-time winner is probably the favorite. But based on what he's done recently, I wouldn't really call him the favorite. I think anybody could win this thing.
I like Kurt Busch. He ran very well in June. I know him and Jeff Gordon were up front for most of the day until rain shortened the race, and I know Jeff had some trouble during practice, so I think Kurt probably has a top 3 car today.
I'm with you. You got to look at that June race, and I think Jeff Gordon and Kurt Busch very strong. I think Gordon's the one to beat. He didn't qualify great. He starts 10th. His practice times were decent, not exceptional, but he's got 3 wins here. He's got 3 runners-up in the last 5 races here. He's a contender. Guys who aren't particularly strong today and maybe will be happy with a top 10 finish, top 15 finish. Gavin, I think you got to start with the Roush guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Biffle and Edwards, they want to get off to a good start. Biffle got off to a great start last year. I mean, I think it's easy to forget the fact that he won 2 races, the first 2 races last year, and kind of faded. So, a good start is important. Obviously, not necessarily a win though. Maybe just running well here, and just getting off to that, getting off on the right foot, and just moving into Martinsville next week, and kind of building off what you can do here instead of, you don't want to. Jimmy Johnson a couple of years ago finished 39th, and I think he was done probably a third of the way into the race, and he ended up winning the championship. So it's not necessary to get off to a good start, but I mean, as far as the mentality going into the next week, I think it's important.
Who do you guys see as a dark horse today, Mike? You got anybody in mind?
I always like Martin Truex in New Hampshire. It's somewhat of his local track, and he always runs well here. So I would look out for him today.
I would second that. He was another car that's been fast all weekend. I think another guy you got to look out for, maybe, he's a chase guy, so he's not technically a dark horse, but a guy who hasn't had a ton of success here is Casey Kane. He's coming off some good races. He's got 2 wins this year, and would not be surprised to see him and the King in victory lane today.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Another guy, possibly, like you said, he's in the chase, so I wouldn't call him a dark horse, but Brian Vickers.
Yep. Moving on to the chase now. We've mentioned guys who are in the chase who have a shot to win today. How important is it to get off to a great start? I know Kurt Busch won here in 04, became the champion. Gavin, you mentioned Jimmy Johnson finished 39th in 06, became the champion. Do you need it? Do you not need it? Can you overcome it, or is it too tough to do?
think obviously you're going to want to get out to as best a start as you can. Momentum can play a huge factor going forward, but like you said with Jimmy Johnson, I mean, you don't need to. You can't do anything that's going to knock you out of the chase per se. You just need a solid finish today.
Anybody you guys, or anything you see as maybe a wild card in this chase? Anything that you think could surprise some people, or maybe a non-chase guy coming up and playing a factor in the championship?
Well, you guys both know me and know how hard this is for me to say, but Kyle Busch, you can't. He's just an interesting factor because you look at the past, and a lot of the guys talk about giving the 12 guys or 10 guys a couple years ago that are in the chase respect. And, not to say that Kyle won't be respectful to the guys that are out there racing for a championship, but everyone knows he wants to win every week. He wants to run up front. He wants to be out front and lead every lap. So I find him very interesting just in the sense that I think he's going to use these 10 races to make a name for himself and get himself out there more and just say, guys, don't forget about me. I might not be in the chase, but I'm still a factor. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see him go out there and win 4 or 5 races during the next 10 races. I think it's possible.
And I would agree with that. I would say a big wild card would be just teammates in general. I think Kyle Busch might play a big factor in how Denny Hamlin finishes, and I think the same thing with Dale Earnhardt Jr. I mean, he could really help out his Hendrick teammates, and that could be a big wild card down the stretch.
Yeah, the other thing I think you have to take into account is that the 13 through 25 guys aren't as bad as they've been in years past. Those guys are all factors. There was 9 race wins by drivers who didn't qualify for the chase this year, which is more than the last 3 years combined. And I think if you look at that factor, you're not going to see somebody with an average finish of 5th. You're gonna need to be more in the 6, 7, maybe even 8 range to get this done, because there are just so many good cars. Every position is going to be a battle, and I think that's going to be a main difference. So let's lay it on the line now. Who wins the 2009 chase for the Sprint Cup?
Oh boy, I think this is probably a cop-out answer, but I really think it's Tony Stewart, just based on what he's done this year. He's got Hendrick behind him as far as his engines. He's not totally doing things on his own yet as an owner / driver. And with what you have to figure that if without the chase format, without going to this playoff in the old system, he's probably 3 solid finishes, maybe 3 top 10s away from winning this thing, making the last basically 7 races irrelevant. So I think just based on what he's done so far this year, that he has to be the guy that you got to look at.
I would agree. I think he's kind of fallen off the beaten path as of late, so I don't know if that's a worry going into it. But I like Denny Hamlin. He's never won more than 2 races in the season. He's already won 2 coming into the chase, including a win last weekend in Richmond. So I think he's got momentum on his side, and I think, like you mentioned earlier with Kyle Busch possibly playing a pivotal role, I think it'll help him to have that teammate there. So I wouldn't count him out. I think he's the one to beat.
I'm going to go with Jeff Gordon. I think he's been kind of saving himself this season a little bit. I think his 2007 dominance opened his eyes a little bit. He realized that the regular season at this point, as long as you're in the top 12, that's all that matters. He's been getting ready for these 10 races for the first 26. I think he's the one to beat. But at the same time, I mean, the easy argument to any pick other than Jimmy Johnson is, how do you pick against him? It's the same 10 tracks. He's proven he knows how to do it. His team's the same. It's just as good as it's ever been. So, I mean, there's 4 names. I think we're going to be in for quite a ride here over these next 10 weeks. Guys, thanks for joining me. Everyone enjoy the blog today, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Dave.